Hello, this is John Hauser again, and my last video I realized that some things didn't come through as clear as they should have. So I wanted to show that my name was on this side of the plane here, and that the pilot's name was on the other side. I wanted to make sure that was clear. And then the pilots, this is the photo of the pilots. These are the pilots that were on duty that flew these A-37Bs while I was in South Vietnam. So I just wanted to clear that up. I wanted to make sure that that was clear because the last video, I'll tell you right up front, I am still new at this. I'm still new at it. But now, I'm going to move to a completely different subject. I'm going to talk about a few things, but first I want to say this. I am retired. I'm coming up on 76 years old. I retired 8 years ago. Now, did I really retire? The answer is no. I didn't really retire. I was self-employed. I was a self-employed sales contractor. And if I haven't explained that in one of these videos, then the next one I will. But I was a sales contractor, and I was under contract with a company to present their product. They would make the appointment, and I would go to the appointment, and I would do a presentation on the product. If the customer liked the presentation, if they liked the product, and if they liked me, they would generally buy. And one thing I found out is that if you will be open and honest with people about your product and about yourself, you have a much greater chance of making a sale rather than going in there with a lot of hype and a lot of false enthusiasm. I would generally just walk in and sit down with them, and I'd have a legal pad, and I would ask questions and find out what it is they wanted to do, where they wanted to do it, when they wanted to do it, how much did they want to spend on the project, did they need to finance. I went through an entire list of questions so that when I got done with all these questions, I had a good idea of what the customer wanted. And also they understood that I was actually trying to meet their needs. But as I was approaching age 68, I was getting a little weary of driving 20, 30, 40,000 miles per year. And I decided that I was going to retire. And so I did. I told the company that I was working for as a sales contractor that I was going to be phasing out. And I went to part-time. And then after a while, I went to no time after I got all these accounts closed and everything the way it was supposed to be. So after that, I was retired about 6 months. And I got caught up on a lot of things I wanted to do. I got caught up on the fishing. I wanted to fish, I had this little boat, and I had all these great dreams about catching the ultimate fish, big fish. It's amazing when you talk to a fisherman. The fish always start out. But anyhow, so then I started doing eBay, and I did eBay for about 6 years, and I was very happy with eBay. I had no problem with it. I had no problem with going out and finding things, and that was actually the part of working eBay that was actually the most exciting. The most exciting part was the stress of going out and finding that new item, the hunt. I was hunting, not with a rifle, not with a bow and arrow, but with a credit card and cash. I would go through the thrift stores, and I had a route set up. I'd go through the thrift stores, and I'd be looking for antique items. I'd be looking for clothes. I'd look for books, old books. I had that experience where I found one old book that after all expenses and all the shipping and everything, I actually cleared $300 on that one book. I had another set of books I cleared like $125. It was the thrill of the hunt, of going out there and finding stuff and digging around yard sales, estate sales, anywhere I could go that I could find stuff and locate it and sell it. So I didn't really retire. I really just took a few months off, and then I started eBay, and very happy. I sold some stuff on Poshmark. I sold some items on Etsy. I have sold things on Facebook Marketplace. I would advertise it on Facebook Marketplace, And depending on the item, I would either go there and meet them, or if it was a very large item, such as a toolbox or a bicycle, I would have them come to my house. Now, why did I start doing that? Why did I do that? Why did I go back to work? Well, the truth of the matter is, a person like me, of my personality type, and I'm not sure what type that is, but a person of my personality type needs a certain amount of stress to be happy. That's right. A person like me needs a certain amount of stress to be happy. Just to sit down and say I'm retired just led to unhappiness. Now, I have shown you these pictures of when I was in Vietnam. It's something interesting about the people I was stationed with in Vietnam. We were on a closed base in Vietnam. In other words, we couldn't leave because it was too dangerous to go off base. You just couldn't go. You couldn't even get a pass unless you were going to Saigon, and then you had to go in a secure vehicle, carry an M16 and all that kind of stuff. But the thing about the people I worked with when I was in Vietnam, when I was just in the 8th Special Operations Squadron, is the people, by and large, were not unhappy. As a matter of fact, most of the mechanics and the jet mechanics and the service people and the people that worked on these, including the bomb loaders, most everybody was in a good mood. I know this is surprising, but you think about people in Vietnam in a good mood and good humor. Why? Because they had something to do. Every day when we went to work on these jets, we had something to do. We had something to do. My name was on the side of this jet here. And my name was on the side of this jet. And this jet was like having a little Corvette that flew. You know, if you saw this compared to other bombers, they were very large. But this plane was very small. It's kind of like comparing a Corvette to a Mack truck, a big truck. But this little plane was fast. And it had the pilot's name on one side, my name on the other side. And we had a mission. And while we were doing this mission, everybody was relatively happy. Yes, we were killing people, blowing up houses, blowing up villages, wiping out all kinds of stuff, blowing up tanks. All kinds of stuff was happening over there. But we actually were relatively happy because we had a job to do and we had a mission. So I have found over the years that you need a little bit of stress in your life. You need a little bit of stress to help you be happy. Now, I'm going to show you a book that I read some time back, and the name of the book is called Rush. I'm going to give you a couple excerpts out of this book, Rush. And on the title he says, Why you need and love the rat race. The rat race. Now, one thing I found out about years ago that had to do with the rat race is that if you win the rat race, if you actually were to win the rat race, you're still a rat. I love that joke. I've been waiting a while. If you win the rat race, you're still a rat. This is a very good book. Now, I don't agree with everything in this book because for some strange reason, like a modern author, they want to talk about evolution, which I don't believe in evolution. I don't think that the human race is actually, in other words, we haven't become a different species. You know, men were men and women were women, and men were men and women were women, and the men were glad that the women were women, and the women were glad that the men were men. It's happiness, right? Anyhow, he wrote this book. Here's the author's name. I'll put it up here where you can see it. I'll tell you, I'm not selling this book. It may even be out of print. I've had this for quite some time. But I have marked some spots in here. Let me tell you when this book was printed. And the name of the book is called Rush. And it's very well written. But I should have looked this up before I started talking here as to when it came out. Oh, it actually was printed in 2001. That's when it was printed, 2001. Now, in the books that I read, I make notes. And one of the notes that I made here was the author in places tends to get bogged down in evolution. During the year for the 2000s, a lot of authors would use the same nonsense. I read this in book after book about evolution and the lizard brain and all that stuff. It's just garbage. But he does make some really good points in here. And so I wanted to share this with you. And here's the thrust of the book. Stress is actually good for us. Work is actually good for us. I recently saw a video on a European actor who came to the United States to make a movie. And his comment was that as he was going through the United States, he said, everybody is working. He said, you'll drive by somebody's apartment at 4 o'clock in the morning, the lights are on and they're on a treadmill. At 8 o'clock at night, they're still working. He said, in the United States, everybody is still working. Now think about that. The Europeans for years, I have nothing against the Europeans, but the Europeans for years have bragged about how much time they take off, how long their vacations are, how short their work week is. And yet Europe as a whole is sinking like the Titanic. And Americans over here, we're working our butts off and the economy is growing and we got the biggest military and we got all kinds of good, wonderful stuff. And if you look in YouTube, it doesn't take long to realize that more Europeans are coming to the United States to visit because they like it here. And we have the pace. And the United States right now is hot and is growing. But this book right here is called Rush. Now I'm gonna try and flip through here and point out a couple of things to you without divulging too much and reading too much. But I want to share some of the things that the author says here. He says there is no proof that cutting out the frenzy would make us happier. In other words, what he's saying is that reducing stress and reducing the frenzy in life down to zero doesn't necessarily make you happy. He says that happiness comes from the rushing around. We feel better chasing the tails even if we never catch them. The hunt makes us happy. The hunt. And that was my experience when I was in sales. I actually got into sales in the early, I guess it was the early 80s. And I became a sales contractor, as I told you. And I had my own retail outlet where we sold stuff. And I was the primary salesman in that outlet. And we worked with our daughter and son-in-law at a relocation company. And I used to go out and sell the moves. And I've sold vacuum cleaners and I've sold wallpaper. Back in the days when wallpaper was popular. I've sold a lot of stuff. But it was always that point where you get down and you put the sale on paper and the customer signs it and gives you a deposit. It's a great feeling. Now, I understand that a lot of times people are in a lot of jobs where they don't get that kind of stress, but you still have the goal of trying to accomplish what your company is after. Just like when I was in the military and stationed in Vietnam, the people were actually happier than when I was stateside on a stateside base. On a stateside base, the military people, a lot of times they were all just complaining. They would say, the best Air Force base that you ever been or ever were at is the one you just left and you want to go. All they did was complain. But for some reason, when I was in South Vietnam, there wasn't a lot of complaining. There was work. There was a mission. We had a goal. And the same thing's true if you're out hunting something. And what I'm trying to say is that it's a pretty good book. You might want to get your hands on. It's called Rush, Why You Need and Love the Rat Race. But again, the problem is, you're competing with a bunch of rats. He says, could it be that competition extends life? Could competition extend life? Very possible. Just take a look right now at our current president. The president right now is 79 years old. He's got a family. He's got companies. He's got lots of businesses. He doesn't need to do what he's doing, but he does it. And when you look at him, he looks pretty good for 79. He only sleeps 4 hours a night. He works every day. You got to hand it to the guy. Okay. He says here, stress is good for you. Retiring makes you stupid. He says stress is good for you. To retire is to become stupid. I have met so many retired people, especially when I was in my last occupation. I would go to people's homes, and they're sitting there, just watching TV. And you try and talk to them, and they've been retired a couple of years, and their entire life became sitting in front of the TV. And you'd have to ask them. I'd say, Mr. Brown or Mr. Jones or Mrs. whatever, is there any way I could get you to shut your television off? Because I have some things I need to say to you, and I want to be able to share this information about these products. And they'd go, oh, sure. They'd shut the TV off, and all of a sudden they'd come back to life. So part of my job when I was working with retired people that wanted remodeling products was to get their attention and wake them up. Why? Because he says it right here in the book, and it's true, I've experienced it. He says, stress is good for you. Stress is good for you. Retiring makes you stupid. All right, I need to move on because I'm soon going to be out of time here. All right. He says, let's see here. It is the race itself. It is the race itself, sloppy, risky, intense, that can bring us happiness. It is the very pursuit of love, new knowledge, wealth, and status that literally delivers the rush and lights up our brains. That was the thing when I was out there hunting that stuff for eBay. You found it. You found that item that you could put on eBay and you could sell and make a little bit of money. Or the same thing was true when I was in sales. You'd go out and you'd write a $20,000 or a $30,000 deal, and you walk into the office the next day and your chest is stuck out and your head is way up here and you're a foot taller. Like Bobby Darin says in the song, all of a sudden you're taller. It was that rush. It was that hunt. And I have a lot of friends over the years that I could tell you about, but I got to move on here. He says here, competition is the root of our success, not an anchor dragging us into misery. When I was in sales, the salespeople always competed with each other to see who could be the best. And it was that competition between the salespeople that caused the company to grow. The same thing is true in every single industry. Competition to be the best school teacher. Competition to be the best preacher. I've known a lot of preachers over the years, a lot of pastors and preachers. And even among them, there's this competition to have a little bit bigger church, to be able to deliver a little bit better message. That competition is good for us. Flip over the page here. Let me go to something here a little bit more because I'm tending to running on here, and I'm going to run out of time. He says, what's the big idea? You can't and shouldn't avoid the anxiety that comes with work and freedom. So I'm going to wind this up right now, even though there's a lot more in this book I could quote. But here's what I wanted to say. Going on a cruise is fun. Been on several cruises. But I've had just as much fun accomplishing a work-related goal as if I was on a cruise. As a matter of fact, I'm on a cruise for 2 or 3 days. I'm bored. You can't leave the ship. You can't drive anywhere. And the same thing is true with being retired. It didn't take me long after I was retired to get caught up. So here's what I'm trying to say. As a retired person, if you want to look better, if you want to feel better, if you want to smell better, have an activity. Have an activity. Read a book. Go to a church and join a church and become active in the church. Churches all the time have some great programs going on. Become active in the community. A little part-time job like eBay or Poshmark, or they want to call them side hustles and gigs and all that stuff. Hey, it's a little part-time job. As I've said before, I drive for Uber, not just to make the money. It's actually that little sense of competition of going out there and doing a few rides and making a few bucks, and it keeps you alive. And of course, you do want to get some modern exercise. But if you want to keep your brain stimulated, you want to keep this thing up here working, which is very important because you want to grow new brain cells, read. If you're going to watch TV, watch some informative videos on YouTube, and set yourself some goals and try and accomplish something that hasn't been accomplished yet. A few years back, I think I was about 73, I had never been zip lining. So we went zip lining, and I'm not talking about one of these low zip lines. We went to Oregon, and we had this zip line that when you were done, you were like 150 feet or 120 feet up. And the zip line, the whole zip line thing lasted for well over an hour, and you wore the harness. I'd never done that before, but it was a real experience. My wife and I went down to Beaufort, North Carolina one time, and we went parasailing. My wife didn't like it, but I did. It was fun to go up in that parachute. Go-karts. eBay. Go out and find something. Whether you don't make a lot of money on it. The truth of the matter is not that much money is really made on eBay. Some people make a lot, but the average is not that great. But it's the thrill of finding something and selling it and shipping it out and knowing that the customer is happy. Well, that's all in this video for right now. Thanks for watching.